Welcome to Taking Care of Lady Business, where we put the business back in lady business. Hosted by Jennifer Justice, founder and CEO of the Justice Department, a management strategy and law firm that works with female and woke male entrepreneurs, executives, talent, brands, and creatives to build and maximize their wealth, focusing in the areas of tech, consumer product, finance, media, entertainment, and fashion. Jennifer interviews entrepreneurial women who have done it all, who will be sharing their secrets on all things business, especially as a woman. These highly successful women will share strategies and insights, including what not to do and what it takes to win. And now, here's your host, Jennifer Justice.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Taking Care of Lady Business, putting the business back into our lady business. Today, we have Suchi Reddy. Suchi is an artist and an architect and founder of ReadyMade. Hi, Suchi. How are you?
Hi, Jennifer. I'm good. How are you? So nice to be here.
I know. It's great. I'm so happy. I mean, I haven't seen you in so long, so it's good to at least see your face, right? So tell us a little bit. I mean, I wanted to have you on here for obvious reasons. You're a trailblazer in the field of architecture. Very few women in it, obviously, and very few women with their own firms. And so, and it's such an amazing space to be in, if you live in New York City and just walk around and see all the different kinds of architecture. But in general, I just think I think everyone listening is going to be fascinated by your story. So let's get into it. And I want to first hear about what ReadyMade is and how long you've been doing it when you started it.
Great. ReadyMade is an architecture and design firm, primarily. We do all kinds of things. People always ask, it's a typical question once you say an architect is like, oh, what kind of architecture do you? What's your style? What I will say is that we do all kinds of things, from ground up houses to buildings to art installations, which has, spawned an artistic practice over the last 10 years, and interiors. I really am a design omnivore. And when people ask me, what is your style? I say, well, I'm really, I've come to the conclusion that what I am is a modernist, but more importantly, I'm a serenist. What I like to do is make things serene as much as I can, anywhere I can, because I believe in the value of that for us as humans.
So take us through, well, that's amazing. I think especially now everyone wants serene, right? It's like, that's what you really need.
Yeah. Oh, and I forgot to say, I've been doing it for 20 years. This is the 20th year of ReadyMade.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well, I mean, I'm glad that you said that, because the next question is like, take us like how you got to like, why did you start your own? So how did you start out? Where were you before?
So it might not be apparent from my voice, so I will say it. I was born and raised in India. I came to this country when I was 18 years old. And, I always wanted to be an architect because at the age of 10, I had the amazing experience of growing up in a house where my father actually hired his friend who was an architect to design it. And in those days, that wasn't a thing you did. It was mostly just builders, and they built whatever fit in the space. And I remember having this distinct epiphany when I was about 10 years old, that my house was changing me, that it was making me the person that I was. So I had this like reaction to space, really feeling like it's changing who I am. And that led me to be an architect. And when I came to this country, as a young immigrant woman of color, no connections, no nothing, no kind of guidance as to which schools to go to or what to do if you really wanted to be a successful architect. Nobody gave me any kind of a roadmap. There were lots of obstacles. I was also married at a really young age, and it was, more like, who's going to have the babies? Those kinds of important questions. But questions that didn't quite fit with my life plan at the moment, So anyway, 20 years later, here I am in New York City. I moved to New York after working for lots of different architects in 1997, been here since then. And I was working for other architects. And I remember when 9/11 happened, I had to actually go to a job site and I saw the whole thing. I had to clear the guys from the site. And I took time to really think about whether what I wanted to do in this world was be an architect. And I came back to this idea that this is my skill. This is how I make the world a better place. and this is what I need to do. And eventually that morphed, you know, very organically. I didn't have a business plan. I didn't think I was going to have my own shop. I was perfectly happy working at the firm I was working at. They're still my mentors. They're amazing people. But something happened, you know, there was a downsizing that had to happen. And the same day I got a call from someone that said, will you design a house for us? And I said, okay. And that's how I started my firm 20 years ago.
Oh, wait, so the same day, so you're having this epiphany that you need to be free, like not work for other people. They also were like, September 11th happened, the economy is crashing, we need to downsize, so we're going to let you go. And somebody
called the same day.
Called the same day. So like
yeah.
they say like things happen in threes, like that's pretty insane. But then you followed your intuition, like instead of like working out of like scarcity or fear, you're like, I guess this is a sign and I'm going to take this and move forward with it.
I've always been that kind of person, you know, this is a sign person, you know. But yeah, I had a very funny sign. When I was working in Wisconsin, of all places, and a friend of mine had, you know, before I moved to New York, and a friend of mine had said, come over here, you know, this firm is really good and they'll teach you all these things and da da da. And I said, okay, I'll interview, we'll see. And then she took me to the Capitol, and I get out of the car and I hear all this Indian music around me. I'm like, what's going on? You know, Indian music in the middle. It turned out it was like the Indian Students Association, like day or something. So they were playing music somewhere that I heard, but for me, this was a sign. I was like, oh, I'm meant to be here. Okay, this is what I'll do, you know. But yes, following your intuition, my intuition certainly has been the thing that has guided my practice through all of this time.
That is a real common theme on this podcast for all women that I interview. So from Taryn Toomey, who started the class, you know, her episode came out a few weeks ago, to Jennifer Fisher, came out yesterday, her jewelry, I'm wearing some, like intuition, follow that. Don't listen to the haters, follow your intuition.
No.
But like along this way, are you getting, you know, support and people like, yeah, you should really do this? Or is it like,
no, right. I will say that, no. I mean, sorry to be so blunt about that, but I can't wash that in any way that, you know, sounds great. I will say that maybe over the last 5 years or so, it's been nice to be recognized for the work I'm doing, to have people come up to me and say, well, I see that you have a particular skill, also because I'm really interested in the way that spaces and atmospheres and buildings affect our bodies, you know, through the lens of neuroscience, through really looking at how our environments are actually not just passive containers, that they're really acting on us. And this goes back to my epiphany of when I was 10 years old, you know, and really connecting those dots through kind of a research-based bent to my practice. And people come to me now, but this idea of support and opportunity does not exist in the field of architecture. It really doesn't. Working as an artist, I find it a little bit more than I do as an architect, which is a really interesting dichotomy, you know?
Right.
But
why do you think that is? Why do you think that is in architecture?
Well, I think societally we have all these systemic setups that really need to shift, you know, because when you look at the number, I think the number of women architects is something like 2%, it might be 4% now. And the number of women of color is maybe 0.2 in the profession. Right. And it is actually a very difficult profession for women. We do have, like, we see a drop off. When you look at the data, you can really see that when it's a very time consuming profession. People don't believe that it's ever a 40-hour week job, you know, it's quite intense. So when women have children and they have to be present for their young ones much more than, you know, they would at other times in their life, we do see a drop off in the profession. It's quite difficult for people to manage, you know, everything. That said, there are amazing women who do that, who work, who teach, who fit it all in and, you know, somehow rise to the occasion, but it's a very difficult thing to balance. And societally, we don't have the support for that. And then secondly, in terms of opportunities, the way that architectural projects come about in this country is very different than it is in, say, Europe, for instance, where a public project is open to a lot of people. Right. And you do have to have the credentials and you have to kind of build them. But you do, if you're a newbie with a great idea, there is the possibility that you might actually make it. That happens much more there than here, you know. So those are the kinds of things I think that really affect those numbers.
Why is it so demanding on a time?
It's really hard to explain that to anybody who doesn't do it, because the problem is that if you imagine you're working on a building or something, we create these sets of drawings that are hundreds of pages. Let's say you want to change a window here, one thing, right? That changes things on those hundreds of pages. It might change other things. And even though we now have technology that can track that, there's also, it's not just a functional business, right? It's an artistic practice.
Right.
So we're melding art, we're melding function, we're melding science, we're melding engineering. It's very complex. And I think architects have actually done themselves a huge disservice by downplaying both the complexity of what we do, the enormous kind of professional responsibility that we carry for life safety and all these other things.
Oh, yeah.
Getting licensed and maintaining your license and the kind of insurance that you have to carry in order to be able to do the work, because we also live in a litigious culture and we have to be careful. Mm-hmm. And there are so many things. And then, as an architect, when you go to someone and you say, here's my fee, they say, what? I can go build that myself, because they think I live in space all the time. Why can't I do it? You might, but you won't have the kind of thing that you would have if you went to a professional, So I do that. I'll get on my soapbox a little bit, because I think as a profession, we really have done ourselves a disservice. I think the other professions, people like nobody would think of going to a doctor or a lawyer and say, well, why don't you show me if it works and then I'll pay you? Or give me an idea and then I'll pay you.
Yeah.
Nobody says that. You go to a doctor and you pay.
Well, I don't know. As a lawyer, I can tell you that people
maybe. Actually, I was having this conversation with a friend. I was thinking maybe that doesn't work for lawyers. Maybe they're somewhat in the same position as architects.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's a very complex thing. And I think truly it's one of my hopes that we regain our place as the poets of culture, and that there's an important place for poetry in our culture in space, and that it affects people really, really, really deeply. And it's important more from a perspective of equity, of how you can offer people spaces from which they can be their best and be their best selves. And this is something that everyone deserves, that until as a culture we really come up to that understanding, I don't think we'll go anywhere. And the pandemic, has made that come home.
Oh, well, I know, right? So I want to talk a little bit more about that. Even, like everybody, like I was in my apartment, I had to work. I had a 2-bedroom of, kids, twins, as you know.
Yeah.
And working in that, and not having like my windows, it's an old building, didn't really open that well. It was just like so claustrophobic, and I'm like in fortunate like situations. So, talk about the research and data and everything about that. That's so interesting.
There is a ton of research and data being done about that, even about, rates of loneliness that increased. I think one of the first webinars that I did when the pandemic started, we didn't know if the world was ending or what we were doing with ourselves. It was so poignant, Jennifer. I can't even tell you how much it touched me. There was somebody who was suffering from depression, and they were like, what do I do? What do I do? I don't have my usual support systems. I can't go and see people. There's nothing. And all I could say was like, try to be creative within your space. Try to use the act of making something to bring that, bring something green in, like the things that you could do for yourself. But scientifically speaking, there are things that people are studying, and there is a field called neuroaesthetics that I'm engaged in. That's a fairly new field in science. It's about 15 or 20 years old, and it's a bridge between neuroscientists and artistic communities, really looking at how the science and the arts can come together to really understand how we function as humans, because this kind of separation of us as bodies and beings doesn't make any sense. When you think of an animal, you don't separate it from its habitat. Like, how would you see a spider out of its web? We're that enmeshed in our environment, but we don't respect it that much. We don't think that it gives us back as much, or that it's made for us. I also see it just particularly like when I make a space for somebody, and I've had the pleasure of seeing kids grow up in the houses that I've done. I have long relationships with clients. I have lots of repeat clients. And it's so wonderful to see how they've reacted to the space, what it's given them, how they've felt supported in having something that was made for them. Mm-hmm. There's even that, just a simple thing of having something that's made for you that actually responds to you. And that's why the sculpture in DC that you went to see, and thank you so much for going and taking the kids. When I ask people to speak a word for their future into the sculpture, they take a minute to think about it. Like, what's that word? And for me, that's the work. I want to bring about self-awareness, for people to have a minute to think, to understand their own role, their own agency. And really, when then they speak in and then they get their own like emotional, like light mandala, and that all those lights become part of a collective mandala that's always changing, to also understand the power we have to affect everybody else around us, just by everything we do, even the power of voice.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
really,
that is such an interesting analogy, the spider and the web, and it's also like, why do people prefer Los Angeles over New York or New York over Los Angeles? It's like, yeah, you're right. And there's so much, but we don't really think about it. And so how is it then when you're building things, for a mass amount of lower income people, like, how that affects them? That's what you were kind of getting at, I think, a little bit earlier too.
Yes. Obviously, when you're not designing for a single person and you're designing for a lot of people, you have to make some assumptions for things and we're all unique beings. We really all are on this planet. And if we can respect that and kind of start from that place and really give people, as even within a design that has to be calibrated to a certain kind of mean set of requirements, you can give people places to express themselves, ways in which they express themselves, ways in which they feel that they engage with it in their own unique way. And that agency, that power, has a lot to do with how they experience space. So I'm really thinking about how people experience architecture, not just from, I went in here and it worked for me and it's this big and this fits and that does, but how it's actually making them feel, their own engagement with it. And that's a bigger spectrum of things. So I taught at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign as a distinguished professor a few years ago. And part of that professorship was the fact that the university publishes a book. So I just had this come out called Form Follows Feeling. And, everyone's like, what? Because in architecture, form follows function is a very well-known adage, it's very famous and expressed by a very famous and amazing architect. But this idea that for me, it's all about shifting the compass, really looking at where it's important that the compass points true north in order for us to get somewhere. So how do we recalibrate for where we are as a culture? Who are we? Are we greenwashing? Are we pinkwashing? What are we doing? To really think about that and to align ourselves. And then maybe we can do the right thing.
Form follows feelings. No, it's super interesting. And it's like a great way to think about, as a culture, how we grow as a culture, and thinking about our relation to all of it is, I don't think a lot of people are thinking about. So it's pretty amazing.
No, and it's a very simple, basic thing. We build our worlds outside of our bodies. It's also why I think fashion is important. It's like you start with your body, then you build your next layer and your next layer and your next layer as you're interacting with the world. The quality of all of those things and how they fit you and how they support you. It's like basic, right? When you think about it, it's like, well, that's not working for you. How are you doing what you need to be doing?
So moving on to what you had referenced earlier too, is your sculpture in DC. And I just had, the fortune to be down there and see it with my kids over the last 3-day weekend. And it was like, it's right in the middle. It is the anchor piece or anchor sculpture in the Arts and Industries building. So how did that come about? How is that and why? And tell us everything about that.
Well, I had the good fortune to meet an amazing woman who you must have on your podcast, Isolde Brillmeyer. She's now
Isolde.
Yeah. Isolde. Yeah. So I met Isolde. Isolde and I were on a jury for something once, and we were, I was so impressed with her way of thinking. And she reached out to me and said, I'm curating this thing. Would you throw your hat in the ring to think about this? Because you do installations, you're an architect, but you're also an artist. Would you be interested in thinking about humans and technology? And I said, absolutely. It's something that's always in the back of my head. So that's how it happened. So I put in a proposal, and I was chosen through a process with all of the people involved at the museum, with AWS, who's Amazon Web Services, who's the major supporter of both the sculpture and I think the show called Futures, which is an amazing show that talks about.
Show. I
Yeah.
didn't even like art, like those kinds of museums, are really amazing, just especially for kids, to be like, oh, this is the future. And they're like, oh,
Right.
they already see it, we're like,
Yeah.
woo. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's so important. The value of those things, I think, are really what they do for these young kids. Like, I think there's data actually on how the World's Fairs affected children of their time and what those children have gone on to do. It's a really interesting thing, because it's a very important thing to be able to show children possibilities. And if they go in there and they see, a sculpture full of light and sound, and, that's listening to them and responding to them, or they go and see a flying car, their idea of what the world is and what the world contains in it is very different than before they walked in those doors, right? So, and that's the power of it, for me, that's the power. Yeah.
And a lot of those museums are what happened in the past, right?
Yeah.
And so instead, this is like looking forward and like, yeah. So how did you come up with the idea? So talk a little bit about it for people who haven't been there, for people, and so they can go see it, so you can give more insight into
Sure.
it.
So the sculpture is called Me Plus You, and I came up with it because, as all of my work does, I think about usually these themes of individual agency and collective responsibility. That's really how I see us as functioning within our communities. And so I've always been fascinated with sound. I looked at this, and being an architect, I looked at the space, and this is amazing rotunda with all this light coming down. And I was like, oh, this has to be a light sculpture, So how am I going to take this idea of voice and of people's voice? Because I really felt that in technology, what was important is our own self-awareness and our engagement with it. And that's why I knew it had to be something that was me plus you. It wasn't just going to be, oh, technology is taking over my world, or it drives everything. It's not a thing. You get to actually drive this, and you're the one creating these things. So it depends on you. And that's really what I wanted to, show. So then it became this idea of, how do you work with technology? How do you find artificial intelligence and machine learning to understand people's emotions? Because I also have, so usually when I work on something, all these themes that I am interested in from childhood to now will come together somehow, so whether it's like sound or agency, or, how do I, work with technology or space or emotion, I was like, this has to be an emotional sculpture. How am I going to make it about emotion? And I was looking at the particular aspects of machine learning that allow you to understand emotion. So what happens in the sculpture, as you know, is you walk up to it, and it's a big light cloud with a central vertical piece that has a kind of a light totem moving in it. And people are requested to go up and speak into these clusters of lights that I call mandalas, and give it a word for their future. And it reads your voice, your emotion, and understands what that is and classifies it through machine learning. And over that, I worked with another graphic coding team. So we made all of the lights respond to you in kind of this light pattern that's specifically yours. So it's never repeated. It's always, even if you say the word again in a different kind of tone, you'll get a different configuration. And all of those lights then give you back your own reaction. So it's really reflecting you to you, right. And then taking, your colors and making them part of everyone's colors. And so a follow-up project is really at some point kind of slicing the colors in the central totem where everyone's colors come together to really see, kind of create like an emotional lunar calendar to see, were we feeling happy, were we feeling sad? And of course, I did a digital sculpture as well. So you can access this on the web. There's a website called meplusyoufuture.com. And if you go on there, you can play with it, and you'll see that you can enter words and get your mandalas. You can save them to Instagram. You can, do all of that. So that's how that came about and what it is.
Everyone, when they go to DC, go there. And what's great is it's open, that museum's open later than most of them.
Is it? And the show is on through July 6th of this year.
Awesome.
So there's a little time.
Yeah. So you have some time.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your 20-year anniversary, and you've been doing this now for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, when somebody's been doing something that long in a company, being, a renegade, as like a woman and a woman of color, and a field that has 0.2, right, percent of women
Mhm.
of color. There's a lot, I'm sure, that you've learned in this and things that you may have done differently. Are there things that you can share with the audience about, your progression here and evolution and, things that you did right, things that you did wrong?
Sure. It's turning 20 is a real milestone, and it's actually been nice because I don't know if you've been there, but we also designed Google's first flagship retail store. It's in Chelsea. It's on the ground floor of their building, so to finally, architects are late bloomers anyway, mostly. Generally people don't, come into their own until they're in their 60s, but that's changing, mostly for men, but it is changing. Thank God. No, I'm serious. It's changing because there's a young woman who has now been nominated to work on an expansion to the Met, which I was so happy to hear. I was like, oh my God, finally we're doing it, but when you learn when you have lasted so long, the one thing I will say is that diversity has been key to my success. I never thought about it. It wasn't a business strategy really, but my work has always taken me, my mantra was nice people and nice projects. So then I took on what I thought were nice people and nice projects. And so it didn't matter to me what they were. If it was a house, it was a building, it was fabric, it was ground up, it was not, didn't matter. And the diversity of that actually has helped us really weather all the recessions and everything, because if one sector of things was not working, there was another that was, and so if it wasn't architecture, it was going to be interiors, and if it wasn't high-end interiors, it was going to be objects and fabric, furniture and things like that. So there was always things that kind of kept us going. The other thing was to really modulate growth. I've slowly added people. We're getting up to 20 people over 20 years, and it's a slow process. I think there is really this kind of tendency to think, and it works in other industries where you can have venture capital, but not so much in artistic practice, where you kind of have to grow it slowly. And I like to keep be involved in the sense of the work, which means the details as well. So my team is absolutely amazing. I could never do any of the stuff that I do if I didn't have such amazing people working with me. But you lose that kind of touch the larger something gets, So I'm really thinking about like the quality of what you do versus the quantity of what you do.
Yeah.
So the challenge really is to get innovative clients who are interested in doing something really amazing and who want to support you with that,
right?
And that's what I'm looking for. And now
follow your intuition.
Indeed, follow your intuition. Never give up. That's another one. You just can't. No, you just have to keep going.
Not an option, right?
No,
not really. Option. Well, let's talk about some of the things. So you did the Google store. What else have you done so people can understand like your breadth of work?
That people can see. Most of the other work is private. That's what makes it a little bit harder. These are the more public things that people can access. I did do a sculpture in Times Square 3 years ago that a lot of people saw. It was about love and justice. I also did a big installation in Prospect Park a while ago that covered 2.5 acres with yellow pinwheels. So more the artistic works are the more public ones. The architectural ones have tended to be more for private clients yet. I'm still waiting to get my public architectural commissions 20 years in.
And you'll do it globally, yes?
Yes, anywhere.
Okay.
We do work in other places right now. And all over the country. We're in Florida, California, Rhode Island. Where else are we right now? Baltimore. Oh, one of the really interesting things we're doing, which has to do with also the interest in neurosciences, we're building a resilience center for the staff at Johns Hopkins. So it's a wonderful project to be involved in to help relieve the stress of healthcare workers, which we all know has been so intense.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine how important that space to feel serene would be. That's amazing work. And I don't think that people really think about it. I know I'm so affected by space. I still think about this house that I rented 2 summers in Amagansett. And it was not the nicest house, but it was like one of those upside down ones. And you walked up and it was basically in the dunes, and the light always just was like, the second I got there, I was like, this is amazing. and you felt like at
you feel it in your body.
You can feel it in
know?
your body for sure. Yeah. I love that. But like, thank you for bringing it all to the forefront and know that there's an actual science behind it. And we need, as a culture, to really like think about our relation to the environment. Again, like a spider to its web.
And to support innovation, really support innovation, support people who are thinking outside the box. Nothing's gonna change if you don't do that.
Yeah, you're right. Thank you so much. So I know that you have many more important things to do today, so I will let you go. But the one thing I always ask everyone at the end is, what is the worst advice you ever received?
Oh, golly. I think the worst advice I ever got was somebody who said to me when I was having a rather difficult time politically in some kind of a corporate situation was put up with it. I think that was the worst advice I ever got. I don't think you should put up with it.
No, I think putting up with it has got us to the place that we are today. And then there's a big backlash, and me too. It's like putting up with it and dealing with it. And, boys will be boys and all of that stuff is exactly why we're having a massive backlash. Yeah. Well, this was great. Thank you so much. If people want to find you, hire you, find out more about you, how can they do that?
They can reach out to us at our website. You can Google ReadyMade.com or rmdny.com, actually. I don't even know my own website properly. Or on Instagram at ReadyMade Design, ReadyMade Design.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for listening to this informative and amazing episode from Suchi Reddy at ReadyMade. Let us know what else you want to hear, listen to, like, etc. Until next time, I'm Jennifer Justice.